Shabbat Shalom. I think, I hope, I guess I should say that if you've heard me speak at least a few times over the last year, there's a theme that I've been striking a lot. And I went and was trying to do a search through a bunch of old sermons that I've given. It wasn't to the level of like a ChatGPT rundown that was done for me like over a year ago, where the most common phrase I think that I use is "hi friends" or something like that. But one of the things that I talk about the most, because I think it is in fact probably the most important thing that any of us or all of us can and should be doing, is the word build. Building something together. Building a community, building a country, building a world, right? Building a future, right? These are things that I have spoken about again and again and again. This Parsha last year, I spoke about building an ark versus building a Mishkan and what it takes, and one of them is closed and one of them is open, and it was a great sermon, and you should all go back and listen to that. But today, we get a reminder that I got earlier this week also, that I'll tell you about in a second, about the pitfalls of building and the ways in which building sometimes isn't the right thing to do, or is at least seen as wrong. So Migdal Babel, the Tower of Babel, that is the end of our Parsha, is where all the world, we're told, speaks in Safa Achad, in one language, and they're in one place, the valley of Shinar, and they build this city and a tower. And the tower is so tall, stop me if you heard this one before, it what? Reaches up to heaven. Nice job, guys. Okay. I was hoping someone would say, how tall was it? Okay, anyways, we'll work on that for next time. So they build this giant tower. And we know that maybe one of the goals is, the people say, so that we can make a name for ourselves. But we don't really know much else about the building of the tower other than, does God think it's a good thing or a bad thing? Bad thing. Great. Why do we know God thinks it's a bad thing? Because God stops the whole thing with the mixing up of all the languages in Babel or whatever the word is, and it might be Akkadian and it might be Hebrew, and okay, that's fine. But either way, right, God stops this creation and doesn't let it continue. So our commentaries know that the building of the Tower of Babel was bad, but it feels still a little unclear exactly why it was such a problem. Right? So maybe it is a problem of making a name for yourself, and that's something about haughtiness or arrogance. But the truth is that there are other parts in the Torah where people make names for themselves, and that doesn't seem to be such a bad thing. So the question then is, what was wrong with this one? So some of our rabbis say that the problem was not the actual building of itself, not even the fact that it reaches up to heaven, right? Rashbam, again, there's not a quiz on this, don't worry, but Rashbam, 13th century Spanish commentary, he points out that later in the book of Devarim, the Canaanite walls that are built also reach up to heaven, and God doesn't, destroy those and tell everyone that they can't have them. So it might not be the problem of the walls, it's the problem, according to Rashbam, of all the people staying in one spot. If this tower is so great and everyone's there, then they're not going to pru or vu. They're not going to be fruitful and multiply all over the earth. And God wants human beings to spread out a little bit. And so that was the problem that God came to solve. Now, other rabbis are not quite as nice about it, and they say, no, the problem was one of motivation. Right? The reason for building the tower was what the problem was. And so the Midrash tells us that there were three groups of people who wanted to build the tower. One said, we want to go and live there. The next said, we want to go and wage war against God there. And the third brought their idols with them and said, we want to serve our foreign gods on top of this tower. By the way, lugging your foreign gods all the way up to the top of the tower seems like it was doomed to begin with. And that's why God scatters the people so that they can't live there, so that they can't wage war, and so that they can't worship their foreign gods there. Okay. Another rabbi, a later one, says that the problem is one of motivation, but it's a more selfish one. He says that the tower was built to protect its inhabitants from another world-ending event. Why would that follow according to our parsha? Because what happened right before it? The flood. Okay? It actually makes a little bit of sense when you think about it. If the people just witness a flood that covers the whole world for 40 days and for 40 nights, they think to themselves, you know what we got to do? Stilt our houses, right? Or put the cinder blocks on the radiator or whatever it is. We're going to build a tower so tall that we will survive a flood again. And we're going to build it out of bricks so that we will survive fire, because God promised not to flood the world again, but God didn't promise not to bring fire. So we're going to protect ourselves. The problem with this is it's only for the people in the tower. And what Rabbeinu Bachya points out is that the reason why the world is destroyed is because humanity as a whole had become so evil. And so one would think that the thing to do is to help make sure that humanity is no longer evil. But these people are saying, nah, that's not for us. You people do whatever you're going to do. We're going to be in our big tower. We're going to be okay. Shabbat shalom. And that's the problem that God is trying to solve by ending the tower. My favorite theory, and with this we'll wrap up our theories, is Don Yitzchak Abarbanel. Abarbanel says that the problem here is, and this is him speaking, not me, the problem is that this is the creation of private property. Before this, in Eden and everything belonged to everybody. Everybody was just kind of hanging out and eating and doing their own stuff, and they lived where they lived, and that was it. And that the creation of the city and the tower is the creation of the first piece of private property, and God was not okay with that. And then we get Nimrod and the first king, and God is not okay with that. And that's why God tries to mix everybody up so that they will, in fact, I don't know, go back to not having it. It doesn't seem to work out in that read, but I thought it was interesting. And the reason that this was all coming to the fore for me this week is that I have been thinking a lot about what we are trying to build here. I've been thinking a lot about what we as a people need to build, what we as a nation need to build. Right? I think that without a project, we're really in trouble. Right? Well, I don't care what it is, Mars, sustainability, whatever, we need a project for all of us to work on and to subsume a little bit of our selfhood to the group project in. I think that's what our people need. That's what the Torah essentially says, right? Is that we are going to give up some of our own autonomy for others, and we can build something together. And I was at a lunch this week where we were talking about this. And it was a lunch where the 3 county commissioners invited all of the pastors and rabbis and religious leaders in the county to come and have lunch with them. It was in Abington, which, by the way, kind of far away. This is a big county. I'm still new here. I did not book enough time to get home, but okay. And so Pastor Harrelson from Presbyterian Church and he and I, we drove out there together, and we sat in this room with pastors, with religious leaders. I think there were two other rabbis there. And what the commissioners had said is, we want to know what your community wants us to care about. Right? What keeps your community up at night? What do you need us to know that we can help you with? And then we kind of went around the room and shared. And I was very excited to go because I had what to say to the commissioners. It wasn't about SEPTA, Miles. It was about it was about our people. I wanted them to hear about how we're feeling right now. I wanted them to hear about our worries about anti-Semitism. I wanted them to hear about our thoughts about Israel. I wanted them to hear about how we're feeling about being in this community and what that is and what that isn't. And I was ready to go. I was ready to be there and to share. And the first pastor gets up. He's the pastor of the church we were in, a Baptist church in Abington, and he says, the number 1, 2, and 3 concerns of my community, the thing that keeps us up at night, are housing prices. 1, 2, and 3, housing prices. We can afford to pay, but we can't afford to pay this much. Number 4 is healthcare costs and food costs. Number 5 is behavioral and emotional issues for our kids. And everyone in the room is like, yes, amen. I mean, there were a lot of preachers in the room. There was a lot of amens. It was great. Talk about mivalvel language, right? We don't speak the same language that many of these pastors and I. And so there were amens. There were a lot of amens. The next pastor got up and said, it's about housing. It's about food costs. The next 4 talked about SNAP coming to an end, and they don't know what they're going to do. And they were talking about pastor after pastor, priest after priest, talking about these incredible things that they're doing in their churches. They're buying empty lots that people can no longer afford those houses, and they're tearing down the houses, and they're creating gardens so that people can grow food there because they can't afford to get food otherwise. They already have food pantries. There's a food pantry in Pottstown that is it's a synagogue that was bought by a Baptist church. Do people know about this one already? I'm new to this world. So there was a synagogue in Pottstown that was purchased by a Baptist church. The church lets the Jews still pray there, right? They use it as a shul, but they have taken over the rest of the property as a church. And it is, in addition to being a church, it is a medical center where people can get food. It's a food kitchen, a food pantry. He was telling us, the pastor of this, that for the last few years, they average about 50 families a week. And in the last 3 months, it's been 120 families a week. And I was realizing, as they were talking about all of the different amazing things that they're doing, they have these like secret drop boxes for food. And one of the things that they're doing, the problem is because there are so many people who are now food insecure. They have mostly enough, but they need a little bit of help. And because of that, these churches are figuring out ingenious ways to help people with dignity. Right? With like discrete deliveries of food, with a drop box where you can go pick something up, the ways that they are trying to help people is amazing. And when it came to my turn, and I was ready to talk about anti-Semitism and all of these things, and I said first, I have to say, housing prices is not in the top 3 of my community's worries, thank God. And I know that there are people in our community that are struggling, I know that. But even still, food insecurity is not in the top of our community. And I said to the group, I'm sorry that we need to be here for you. And we will. And I shared still with them. I want to tell you about what we're worried about. And I thank you to Sarah Hurwitz. I used her, I talked about a brief sketch of anti-Semitism and everything that we in this room all know, right? That from the Romans through the Inquisition to the Shoah, it's been rough for the Jewish people, and the last 50, 60 years has been really, really great, and now we're worried that it's all coming crashing down around us, and it doesn't matter how secure the people in your communities or the Jews around you look and feel, or you think they might be, we are worried that it's going to be gone in a second. And the pastors were nodding their heads. And they were like, thank you. We actually didn't realize that that's how you felt. And we feel similarly because we have been fighting for equal rights for so long. And it felt like we were just starting to get there. And now we're worried that it's all going away. And we bonded over that. And in the moment of hearing these pastors talk about the incredible things that they do, it hit me like a ton of bricks, pun intended, a midrash about Babel, about the tower. So Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer says that the problem was that the tower, as it got larger and larger and larger, it took almost a year to bring the bricks from the bottom where they were making like the clay and et cetera. The people would walk up the east side, they would drop off a brick as they're building it, they would come down on the west side, and it would take a year for someone to walk up with their bricks and drop them off. And so what happens, according to the Midrash, is that when someone would fall down the tower, the people wouldn't even stop because they were so worried about the project of building this tower to heaven and all the reasons why they wanted to do the name for themselves. But when someone dropped bricks, they would wail and bemoan and they would cry, "Oy vez mir, when are we going to get more? We're not going to get more. Oh no, it's stopping, it's slowing us down, it's slowing us down." And the lesson is that as we build something, we can't forget the humanity of the people involved in the building and the humanity of the people around us. And we in this community have done an incredible job of building an awesome community. I will share with you, Sarah Hurwitz, our guest speaker from Thursday night, we had about 200 people come out to hear her speak, and afterwards she said, "What is this place? I have never seen this many people in one synagogue on a Thursday night. Like, what? This is incredible," right? What we have built here is tremendous, and it should be celebrated. And what we in the Jewish community in America have built is tremendous, and it should be celebrated. When you think about the number of institutions that we have to fight anti-Semitism, to take care of each other, right? HIAS, AGWS, the JDC, the JNF, the USCJ, pick 3 letters, put them together. It's a Jewish organization that is here to help us. Right? We are a gold standard that other groups look to and say, how can we create an infrastructure to help us in the same way that the Jews have done for them? And the Akedat Yitzchak, I promise the last medieval rabbi I'm quoting, Rabbi Yitzchak Arama, he says, and I want to read it, he says that the generation being united by one common language and sharing the same ideas, he's talking about the generation of the tower, become unanimously convinced that the aim of their existence was this tower and this society that they were creating in the tower. Their sin was not in trying to achieve this, but regarding it as an end in itself, rather than as a means to a still greater end. Right? The amazing work that it took to build the tower was incredible. That people working together using one language to build something so amazing that even God took notice, that should be celebrated. The problem was they thought that was it, not that they needed to use that to then do more things. And Akedat Yitzchak says it's about spiritual well-being that they thought for. So for all of us, what we have done in this place to build such a wonderful community, what the American Jewish community has done to build such a thriving and wonderful place, should be lauded. But it also shouldn't be the end. What we have built, what we have, all of our institutions, all of ourselves, should be used to help other people because there are very real people around us who need very real help. And to that end, if you saw in the Friday email, we sent out some links of places that are in need. And we're going to be making a nice donation from the synagogue to the food pantries around us in our immediate area. And I'm checking in with our commissioners of what we can do to help them, because there are people who are in serious need of just a little bit of help in a dignified way. And if we can afford it, then we have to do it. So if you can, please, after Shabbat, click on those links. Give to we have a fund here at the Shul. We will turn it into tzedakah out in our community. I didn't check in with the president of the Shul before I made an appeal here, so I hope it's okay, Renita. Sorry. Okay, thank you. But please, just give a bar mitzvah gift. Give what you can, but we need to help the people around us. We can build what we can. We need to focus on ourselves. We need to have the security that comes from the walls of a tower, the walls of the institutions. We need to build who we are, but we cannot forget the humanity of the people around us while we do. Shabbat Shalom.